TV1, TV for life.
If you're the ugliest person in the neighborhood, there's really no point in sitting around and wondering why people aren't attracted to you. It's up to you to make yourself attractive. Change yourself, do what it takes. Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Eliatambi. Now, what does Sri Lanka need to do to attract investment? And what industries are we looking at to take us into the future? And to discuss all this, I have with me this evening Mathisha Arangala, who is a lead economist at Verite Research on Verite's International Economics team. Good evening and welcome, Mathisha.
Thank you, Niresh.
Right, so Mathisha, it strikes me that Sri Lanka's economy depends on old industries. We have, for example, the apparel industry, which its heyday was, I think, under President R. Premadasa, who launched his 300 garment factory program. That was 35 years ago. Then we have tourism, which started booming in the 1970s, I believe, when Bentota and Beruela became tourism zones, designated as such. And then we have rubber and the rubber products, which again, that industry is, I think, about 150 years old, although of course the rubber products which are marketed now are more modern. And we have tea, an industry which just celebrated their 200th year. So we've got some very old industries which our economy depends upon. Am I correct when I sum it up like that?
Exactly so. So I think the issue has been, as countries develop, going from low income country, going from a low income country to a middle income country, lower middle income to an upper middle income country, you need to sort of transition with the times. And apparel, for instance, so like our focus has always been on agriculture even before the apparel industry started coming in. But like naturally so, like with a lot of Southeast Asian countries as well, we also started producing apparel from the 1990s onwards, late 80s onwards. And apparel is a good industry for a country to start its manufacturing as an infancy. But like since then, we failed to sort of deviate away from apparel and move into other value-added manufacturing, like manufacturing of machinery, electronics and automobiles, which our peers in Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Malaysia and now Vietnam, was able to do. So currently the composition, it's not like we are not exporting these products at all. The composition of these products which sort of led the value chains over the last 20 years, it's only 5% in Sri Lanka, while in other countries in Southeast Asia and even in India increasingly, in Vietnam, for instance, it's at 40%. Malaysia, the same thing. So we have sort of missed the bus when it comes to that. And while these countries, while they are at our per capita, have already established these industries, we sort of are an anomaly whereby a vast percentage, up to 40% of our exports, more than 40% is still, manufacturing exports in particular, are still concentrated in apparel. And if we did a quick calculation to look at what the percentage of apparel in the top 25 apparel manufacturers in the world are, and it is only Sri Lanka and Bangladesh who has a concentration of apparel above 40%. All the other countries who are even exporting more apparel than us have been able to reduce their dependency on this sector. And even countries like Cambodia, over the last 10 years, they have reduced their dependency from 70% to around 30% now, which means that they are also moving into other areas. And the sort of danger that we see in us focusing on these sectors is that naturally the countries who demand these products, agricultural products and apparel, are Western markets, the US and the EU, and these markets are sort of stagnating. So especially the US's, like the increased protectionism from lately, has actually accelerated this stagnation. And what we do by selling these uncompetitive products, low valued, low waged products to stagnating markets, is the only way we can sort of keep on maintaining that. This thing is because there's no growth to begin with, but at least to keep on maintaining is that we have to keep our wages down. And as a result, what has happened is wages in these sectors like tea and apparel have stagnated over time and actually haven't even kept up with real inflation. So the real wages have actually reduced. And this is the issue that we are facing now, whereby we are seeing a situation whereby the sectors which in other countries, export sectors, mean they are the highest paying sectors, they are not delivering, and as a result a lot of our workers, our young people, are willing to move out of the country. And even if we want to go into more high value added sectors, we can't because we don't have the people to begin with. So we are in sort of like a very bad situation of a middle income trap. And in order to get out of this, we need to do some really drastic changes, and maybe I can discuss that going forward.
You spoke about the fact that we have missed the bus.
Yeah.
But, you know, on this highway, there are many buses.
True.
So we may have missed the bus and others have overtaken us and gone. But in the end, we need to get on a bus ourselves. True. And there are buses. So we should start that process. We're only talking about it. I mean, I personally have been talking about this fact that we are not competitive enough. We need to get into new industries for many years. And I've heard professionals such as yourself talking about it for a couple of decades. But we don't seem to be taking those fundamental steps. Is it so difficult to make us more competitive so that we can attract FDI, foreign direct investment, and launch or expand into new industries? Why is it so difficult for us to do that?
So yes,
because that's the bus I'm
that's
talking
the bus,
about.
right? And so the first bus was the growth of the East Asian economies. So first Japan, then South Korea, then China, Taiwan. And Southeast Asia took full advantage of that bus. There were factories starting up in China, in the investments coming from Japan. We can they realized that they can supply components to those markets. We missed that bus, but there's a new bus coming right next door. India's growth, the growth of South Asia, and like India's growing at a rapid rate. So in order for us to, and that is right next door, right? If anyone has to benefit from that growth, it should be us.
We're living right next to the bus depot.
We are living right next to the bus depot, especially considering the fact that most of that growth is concentrated in South India as well.
Absolutely. I think Tamil Nadu,
growth rates of
Kerala, Karnataka,
yes,
and so on.
And recently Tamil Nadu experienced growth rates of over 10%. That's the levels that China experienced over the last 10 to 15 years. So there's a good opportunity for us to do it. And so far, like what it seems as if is that we need to sort of identify what we need to do in order to get the advantage of it, because it seems like the countries around us are again taking advantage of India's growth rather than us. So I'll give you an interesting stat. 2005 to 2024, India's GDP has almost tripled, and within that period of time, so in 2005, for instance, if you take Vietnam as an example, Vietnam just exported $100 million worth of goods to India. Now they are exporting 10 billion. That's 100 times. And Sri Lanka was exporting at that time to India 600 million. So this was after the Indo-Lanka FTA, where we had a surge in exports to India. But since then, currently our exports is just 1 billion. We haven't even able to double our exports to India at a time when India's market has grown considerably. So these are sort of worrying signs because we still haven't, it seems as if we still haven't sort of clicked in that sense. So what we say is, now in order for us to go to the next level, we need value added exports. We need to cater to the the automobile manufacturing plants in Tamil Nadu. We need to sort of supply them tires. We need to supply them other components. In order to do that, in order to create the competencies, we naturally need FDI. But the question that we need to ask there is, why would a manufacturing firm like a multinational which is manufacturing these components come to Sri Lanka rather than going to Vietnam or India itself?
Now, I would think from a layman's point of view that this is a simple process. We need to simply ask them, ask the foreign investors, what is it that you look for in a country? Because they don't care. It could be Mozambique, it could be Indonesia, it could be Sri Lanka. It doesn't matter. There are certain aspects which they look at, and that's fairly simple. I mean, we can even list it out ourselves, but cost of labor, the cost of electricity, the cost of fuel, transportation, ports, airports, all those things. And we can tap those investors and ask them. That's not such a big deal.
Yeah.
Of course, they want other things, currency stability, political stability, a lot of things like that. But once we get that list, and those lists are there, I mean, global organizations and local ones such as yours, you guys do these reports, so it's there for everyone to see. It's all about competition. You rank the countries, and it's very clear where we are in each of these areas. For example, cost of electricity. We know what our cost is compared to the other countries.
Yeah.
So in all these aspects, we need to take a look and accept our flaws and change it, not make excuses.
True. So I think a quote by Lee Kuan Yew: Singapore prospered by creating first world conditions in third world region and becoming a base camp from which entrepreneurs forayed into the less developed areas around it. So Sri Lanka is a small country, so there are different types of investors. There are some investors who look for markets, large, massive markets. There are investors who look for labor. There are investors who look for land. We don't have those. Those investors will naturally go into these other countries. But as small countries, like what we know is, okay, then by that logic, no small country can have like massive export bases. But that's not true. If you take the top 20 exporters in the world, countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, Singapore, Taiwan, they come to the top 10, beating even larger countries like India. And how they have done that is, they have realized what their sort of USPs are, what their weaknesses are. So what we Sri Lanka do is, we compare ourselves with Vietnam, but we can't compare ourselves with Vietnam. Vietnam is double our size, they have triple our population, right? So Vietnam, for instance, an interesting stat, we only have 15 export processing zones. Vietnam can have hundreds. They already have 100. They have around 300 industrial parks. So in that sense, we can't compete with them. And that's where like we need to go into that this thing that small economies win not with scale but with governance, skills and efficiency. So what did these small economies do? They didn't have markets. They went and got markets by signing trade agreements with everyone around them. They signed agreements with the region, because you come to this country to capture the region. And another thing that they identified is, okay, these large countries might have issues because of their size to create the efficiencies that are needed. It's there's too much bureaucracy, there's too much, and that has been the case with countries like India and China. And that's what Singapore capitalized on. If India and China were efficient, there's no reason why Singapore wouldn't be there today. So in that sense, the other thing that a lot of these countries, if we look at the global rankings that you mentioned, global competitiveness index, global innovation index, corruption index, in all these indexes, the top 10 countries are small nations. Because for them, having that ranking is their sort of USP. It's a matter of survival for countries like Singapore to be ranked in the top 5 in the global innovation index or the global competitiveness index. And they make it a priority to do that because that's the USP that they can show when compared to the large economies. So, and in Sri Lanka's case, the danger that we are seeing currently is in these, even in these efficiency indexes where we think that we need to be better, we as a small country can be better than a large country, like we seem to be lagging even when compared to these large countries. And that is a very dangerous trend. So one example in the global innovation index, for instance, what we can see is which looks at things like R&D expenditure, number of patents per capita, the tertiary education rates. So Sri Lanka's ranking has actually dropped from around 79th position to around 80, like in the recent ranking around 89th. Countries like Vietnam, they have actually improved from like in the 70s to 44th. So that means, and that is a country which is much bigger than us as well. So the danger for us is that even in these indicators that we need to be more better than large countries, we are not doing well. And that is a dangerous trend going forward if we don't do anything about it.
Now, you mentioned the rankings drop. If you drop in the ranking, what that means is that other countries have passed you. Or you've done something and become really bad, which of course we did that in 2022. But since then we should be moving back up. But other countries are ahead of us, countries which should not be. And the point is, when we got our independence 70 odd years ago, we were at the top, especially in Asia. We were number one. We didn't compare ourselves with South Asia at the time. It was in Asia we were number one in a lot of these indices. Now we fall back on this, oh, we're number one in South Asia, but of course we are under threat from India, which is becoming much more efficient. But we take solace and say, well, we're doing okay compared to our neighbors in South Asia, ignoring the fact that South Asia as a whole is not one of the best regions on earth, although it's growing very fast. So we tend to make these excuses.
But I think no longer can we make that excuse as well, because if you look at India state-wise, a lot of the South Indian states, including Gujarat in the north and Maharashtra, per capita wise, they have caught up to Sri Lanka. And this is the first time, like when I looked at the latest statistics, Bengaluru, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu have the same per capita income as Sri Lanka now, and they are growing at 10%, which means that by 2030 they'll be double the per capita of Sri Lanka. So that means that if you look at it in the sense of this thing, we can no longer compare, like even like we can't have this thing saying that we are the best in South Asia at least anymore either. And that's where, like, I feel like we need to sort of understand that we need to have these at least going forward. So one good example is the single window. As you mentioned, we were even going up to the 90s, we were leading a lot of these countries in Southeast Asia and this thing when it comes to a lot of this. Singapore started their single window TradeNet in 1989. We were talking about RC Kudak automating customs and all in the 90s itself. And in that pace, we would have had a single window. So, like, for those who don't know, a single window would be a one location, online location, whereby everyone can apply for permits and licenses for their exports from that location itself, and everything will come from there itself, and it's all automated, which makes the process of exporting much faster. And naturally for a country which wants to export, increase exports, this is like the first thing that we need to do. But 30 years on, we are still talking about the single window, and I'm glad that the new government has taken it as a priority to finish the single window in the next 5 years time. But even by that time, other countries are talking about other more advanced things with.
Yeah, but why would it take 5 years to do something like that?
That is also there.
That seems like a ridiculous length of time.
For
if you say 1 year, fine. 1.5 years, fine. 5 years to do anything, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So hopefully they go about fast tracking it, because there have been talks about fast tracking it, this thing as well, putting the legislations in place. But the thing is,
but is it a matter of legislation? Isn't it a matter of cultural change? Because yes, we need the laws, but laws can be passed very quickly now. There's a 2/3 majority with the ruling party, so it can be done. Drafting a new law might take a few months, but within say a 4-month time period, you should be able to pass the laws that are required. So that's not an excuse.
It is a massive cultural change that we need. So to give an example, we have historically not focused on soft infrastructure. So getting our legislation, consistency in legislation, our processes automated, reducing red tape, we haven't focused on that. And we were thinking over the last 15 years that giving tax concessions to investors and building massive highways and ports will do the job. And we were willing to borrow billions of dollars to do that, while not willing to spend millions to get that operating system of the country correct. So as a result, what has happened is we have highways where companies ship containers and it gets stuck in the port for it goes in the highway at 100 kilometers per hour, but it gets stuck in the port because the operations in the port aren't well. We have ports where ships come in, but they can't unload because the port is congested because the processors aren't fast enough to clear the goods, and they go into other new ports which are coming up in the region. So, and we give tax concessions, massive tax concessions for investors, but what's the use of tax concessions if other countries are also giving similar tax concessions and they have given the efficiency benefits all as well? So we don't really have a competitive advantage there as well. So, and that point about that mentality issue comes it's very important when you look at our Sri Lanka's efforts in, we did a report on this recently, efforts in completing the WTO's trade facilitation agreement. So the WTO trade facilitation agreement says
the World Trade Organization's trade facilitation agreement, which all developing countries, most developing countries unanimously signed in 2016, says that we'll complete these 36 measures which look at making the export and import process faster and easier for exporters. Sri Lanka has, and they were given the choice to put these measures under 3 categories. Category A meaning that they have already completed these even by 2016, and this was the case with a lot of Southeast Asian countries as well. Even though they signed into the agreement, they have already completed a lot of these. Sri Lanka has only completed around 20%, 25%. I can't exactly remember the numbers. Category B mean that we haven't really completed these yet, but we'll do it on our own. We'll complete it within the next 5 or 6 years. Category C means we haven't completed it, but we need assistance to complete this. Sri Lanka has put 69% of those measures under category C, saying that we need assistance to complete a lot of these measures. We don't have the expertise and we need funding. While even least developed countries have only put around 40% of the measures under category C. So in other words, we're saying we are incompetent.
We are incompetent. We are even least developed countries.
We can't affect these changes ourselves.
In the sense that I think we are taking the easy way around, because even least developed countries have that confidence to say that they can do these on their own because they feel that these are important things to do. We are taking the easy way out and saying, okay, we'll wait for donors to come and give us funding and expertise to do this, and as a result, even now only 50% of those measures are completed. While
9 years later,
9 years later,
2016 to today.
And the funny thing is, we have put like basic measures like giving consultations to the private sector and other stakeholders before putting out legislations, informing the WTO about these measures. Basic things which really don't need any expertise at all. It's just a matter of signing a document. We have put those under category C, which means that so we even released a video those days saying that Sri Lanka has an attitude problem when it comes to trade facilitation, because that clearly shows where our priorities lie. And hopefully today there is some concrete effort to sort of take this forward, because I think even last year they made an effort to put the National Trade Facilitation Committee under the Ministry of Finance, because before it was under Customs. And at least now there's some concrete effort to take this forward, but that is a good example of where our attitude, the attitude we have when it comes to trade facilitation and soft infrastructure, because we are willing to spend billions on a highway or a port, and get into debt to do those.
But now you mentioned highways and ports a couple of times, but I'd like to take that point up with you. The highways we have are really not sufficient. I think next week the President is relaunching the construction of the Kadawatha to Mirigama phase, and basically more than half of the country has lacked proper development because that section of the highway was never built. It was half built, maybe I think 20% has been built or something like that. So you can't get to Kurunegala, you can't get to Kandy, you can't get to Damulla, Anuradhapura, and beyond, Trincomalee, Jaffna, Batticaloa and all that. So many cities, major cities. I mean, Kurunegala is not a small city, it's not a small district. Kandy, it's one of the largest. So we simply, we've spent a lot on highways, but we only seem to have a highway which goes down south pretty much,
yeah,
and another to the airport.
Yeah.
So that's not good enough. And then the port. I mean, the port needs a lot more development.
It does.
And Colombo is recognized, has always been recognized as the port in South Asia, because it is the closest to the international shipping lane. You can have a better port in Mumbai or Karachi or wherever, that's far away from the shipping lane. So we have the location, and then what did we go and do? We built another tiny little port in Hambantota, which is nothing compared to the port of Colombo. So we've been taking ridiculous policy decisions. The airport, for example, is bursting as it seems right now. I mean, people fly for 8 hours, 10 hours to get here and then spend 3 or 4 hours in a queue at BIA, simply because we went and built Mattala without expanding BIA. So these are absurd decisions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So,
but even now we need to quickly turn it around. We can't wait 5 years or 6 years to do this.
Definitely. So that the hard infrastructure component is important, and we have made some bad decisions because we hadn't had a clear policy with respect to how to implement these. We don't follow a process. We don't do the environmental impact assessment, the feasibility studies, before going ahead with signing the contracts and the loan agreements. And we don't do competitive bidding as well, which means that a lot of these projects are done at exorbitant prices, which means that there's no way we can get the returns from these projects as well. And even when it comes to highways and things like that, like the return comes when containers go on them. And like, so this thing is like, we need to sort of, as you mentioned, prioritize where the which locations it needs to go to. Kurunegala is an industrial hub in Sri Lanka. That should have been prioritized. That hasn't been the case. So
I mean, there is a highway leading out of Kurunegala. It stops at Mirigama. And then you have to take the normal road to Kadawatha. So that's quite ridiculous.
Yes, definitely. So what we are also saying is that we need to complement these. We need to put investments into these as well, but we need to complement them with the operating system which runs them as well.
So this is not rocket science.
This is not, yeah.
We basically need to use our brains. We need highways. Every country needs highways. I mean, unless you're the Maldives, where you can walk from one side of the atoll to the other in about 15 minutes. You don't even need a car. But in Sri Lanka, we need those highways. And we've been talking about it for a long time, and it's not happening. At least now it's going to happen. Then even things like public transport. I mean, we haven't moved in about 40 or 50 years. The same types of buses are running on the road, which are not buses at all. They are lorry chassis with a cabin on top. And we haven't done anything with it. The railways, it's another disaster. We have shut down stations and shut down lines rather than expanding. And the same types of trains are still running. No difference. So we seem to have this problem with moving forward.
So I think the issue comes because we don't know what we want to begin with, and like what other countries have is they have like long-term plans whereby they align all of their policies, be it the education policy, the industrial policy, the trade policy, to that particular goal. So that's where the land allocations, which highways should be prioritized, which ports should be prioritized, that's where that comes from. But in Sri Lanka, what happens is, even though we have these public investment plans and manifestos and other budget speeches, every time the government changes, a lot of these things get revamped. Even if it's the same thing, it changes the name. And as a result, like, we can't have like a coherent policy whereby what we can, one thing we can say is, okay, connectivity is our key area. What do we need with respect to the education policy to get optimize that? We need to focus on maritime courses on maritime. We need to be the hub in South Asia for logistics and other supply chain education. But we don't think like that. And as a result, what happens is we have isolated ministries doing isolated policies which doesn't align to a single purpose. And that fragmentation is what we are seeing now, whereby there is no ultimate goal that we are looking to achieve. And as a result, what happens is we are holding on to sort of short-term sort of phenomenons, right? The Trump tariffs. Okay, we were waiting for the tariffs to reduce, but that is also a short-term solution, because there might not be, even if the tariffs were reduced, we aren't really competitive in the US market to begin with respect to apparel. We saw it in the first Trump tariff war, whereby there were tariffs put on China in 2018. Chinese market share fell by 11%. Ideally, we should have benefited, but our market share in the US didn't even increase by 1%. It stayed the same.
So in other words, other countries grab the Chinese market share.
So even when we get a leg up, we are not able to. So while we've
got a leg up, but we're too fat to jump over the wall.
Jump over this thing. So while these having GST plus, having a low tariff in the US is important to at least maintain our short-term stability, because we are at a current stage whereby our economy is pretty vulnerable. We need to sort of think beyond that to see, okay, what needs to be done. We need to think about moving away from these markets. How do we systematically diversify into other sectors, and in those sectors, what are we sort of good at?
Right. So now this discussion we continuously have, that we need to diversify into other sectors. But what are these other sectors?
So here, I think
because when you think back, the Premadasa regime in the late 80s, early 90s, they identified, I don't know who did it, whether it was President R. Premadasa or the finance ministry or who did it, but they correctly identified that Sri Lanka could tap into the global supply chain for apparel, which is what we do. We import the yarn and all that, the raw materials, we do value addition, and the finished product goes out. So that was a correct decision. So somebody actually thought about it or learnt about it in some way and did it. So now we're discussing, yes, we need to diversify, but into what?
So that's, I think, the question that that needs more study, but it's what
Well,
we
who's
are
going to
saying
do
is,
the study? No,
Yes,
that's the
okay.
point.
So what we are also saying is, we have certain USPs that we need to, it's a no-brainer that we need to focus on this. Connectivity is one. The logistics sector is a natural sector that we need to focus on, and it needs to be much bigger than what it is now. So the regulations which are sort of constraining the land around the things, regulations constraining the build up of warehouses, multi-country consolidation, enterprise trade. So if there are any regulations and other barriers which are sort of hindering that, those need to be reduced immediately, because that's a natural sector that we can move towards. When it comes to the other sectors like supply chain components, so and other services like the BPO sector, so even in those sectors, what we've been seeing is, now we are used to making ambitious targets, export targets. So today we are saying that we want to increase our goods exports from 10 billion, 12.7 billion to 26 billion by 2030, and that requires a growth rate of 12%. Over the past 10 to 15 years, our growth rate has been 1% per year. If we look at it from inflation adjusted, real dollar inflation adjusted value, our exports have reduced from since 2010, because the amount that the dollar can buy has also reduced. So it doesn't matter if our exports were 10 billion in 2010 and 12 billion in 2024, because that 12 billion can buy less than the 10 billion in 2010.
Right.
So which means that if we are so we are used to setting these targets, and even sectoral targets. We have been saying that, okay, the BPO sector back in we wanted to become a $5 billion sector by 2020, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but today it's just still at 1.5 billion, and that has been the case for the last 5 to 10 years. So what we can say is, okay, so there are certain sectors that we can go to. It's hard to say which sector is it supply chains in automobiles, supply chains in electronics, is it BPO, is it another sector altogether. But what at least set up the infrastructure and the soft infrastructure in a way in which any person, any investor who can do that analysis on Sri Lanka and identify that this is the sector that we are, they can easily come in and plug and play and do their business in an effective manner. And especially for Sri Lankans as well, where if they have an idea, they can start a business, export it within a few days, like what you can do in Singapore. So have that system in place at least, because that is what we have called the basic hygiene factor, right? Efficiency and creating those legislative and other consistency is the minimum that we can do. It won't entice an investor to come here, but it being not there means that investor, be it foreign or local, won't even consider investing in Sri Lanka, because the fact that it's not there at all. So if we get that right, we'll let the markets work, and those sectors will emerge as because the investors and the private sector would know best where the money lies. So at least we need to be doing that, and that is not that. Hopefully that's going to happen in the future.
Now it's a no-brainer that we need FDI, foreign direct investment. We absolutely need it, and we have always needed, and we have attracted, but not very much of late. So if an investor asks a simple question, and the question would be, okay, I have the money, I want to set up a factory for a particular industry, how soon can I start operating? In other words, how soon will that factory start producing? Do we even know? So can we even say, okay, you are going to get your approvals in so many days, and you'll get your electricity connection in so many days, you'll be able to, the construction will take, do we even properly know how long it will take? Because in other countries they do,
Yeah.
if you are going to Chennai, if you are going to the Maldives, you know how long it will take. If you are going to Indonesia, you know it. Singapore, like you said, Singapore, in a couple of days you can start up. But here, do we actually know how long it will take?
So one thing is we don't know, because those in most, I mean, I'm not talking about all the board agencies, because there are board agencies which have the systems in place and have like mention and are very transparent in their work as well, by putting a lot of this information in their websites. But a lot of these sectors, agencies don't have that those SOPs documented, and they are not transparent about it also. So even if an investor comes in and looks at their website, a lot of this information is not available, and a lot of this information is not available in all 3 languages as well. So which means that even if a Sri Lankan person wants to invest, most of the time either it's available in English or Sinhala. Tamil version is not like in most instances it's not available. So that means that it has to start by first identifying what these steps are and making them transparent. So at least initially it doesn't even matter if these take a long time, because in order for us to understand how much time it takes, we need to do that run and at least document it. So the next steps could be
if you ask a Sri Lankan investor who has done a project recently, they will tell you. I once asked this question about 15 years ago from a Sri Lankan company which was long established here, and they were starting on a project, and they told me that before they could get things started, they needed to get 51 different approvals, and 51 different individuals asked for bribes. So that's how long it will take.
It will take, yeah.
So we need to identify this, and we need to reduce it down.
Reduce it down.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. Identifying that is the first step.
Right. We are almost out of time, and it's been an engrossing conversation, one that is sorely needed. But Mathisha, can I ask you, digitalization, the government is touting it as it should, and Dr. Hans Vijayasuriya, much respected person, professional, is in charge of it. So we can expect digitalization to happen. Let's say within the next year, we should see a vast change in what in the processes that the public and investors and entrepreneurs have to go through. Will that make a huge difference?
That will definitely make a huge difference, because there's a difference between a country coming from an already digitized this thing to moving into a more like a bigger update of it. We come from the manual system to an automated system, means that's a massive change in the efficiencies, and that is the key. That is the hygiene factor that we need to sort of focus on, because like I don't want to end in a negative tone also, because currently we have the biggest opportunity ever for us to sort of expand our exports and attain that high income status that has been eluding us for a long time. That is South Asia. South Asia is the fastest growing region in the world, and we need to sort of rethink, okay, so now this is happening. Even as a small country, even if we capture part of the Indian market, that's a massive Indian market. And it's not only India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, these countries are growing, and we just need to sort of at the start, one thing is the hard infrastructure is important, highways and these things. Along with those, we need to focus on those hygiene factors, trade facilitation, automation. We need to secure markets around us. We don't have the market. We like what small countries did around them. Singapore has hung around 20, 50, 30 trade agreements. Vietnam being a large country in itself has a lot of trade agreements around the region as well. So we need to secure agreements around this thing, and we not signing the trade agreements is not enough. We need to ensure that they are comprehensive agreements, not just photo ops, and we need to ensure that okay, signing a trade agreements means there is some kind of an impact for local businesses as well. We need, okay, if we sign agreement with Thailand, for instance, Thailand makes it easier for their businesses to operate and export into other countries. It's unfair for us to sign a trade agreement with Thailand and not make it easier for our exporters to export. So in concurrent with signing those agreements, which are important, we also need to make it easier to be fair by our businesses as well, to make it easier for them to sort of start their businesses, import the products that they need, and give them the benefit of an automated system whereby they can easily get their licenses and permits. That's the least thing that we can do.
So we need a multi-pronged common sense approach in order to get on, and we all need to get on that bus. My thanks to Mathisha Arangala, lead economist at Verite Research, for joining me this evening. Thank you very much for being with me. And thank you to our viewers for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.